In the heart of the land, nestled between rolling green hills and ancient baobab trees, lay the village of Akani. It was a place where time seemed to move slower, where each sunrise was greeted with songs, and every villager knew not just each other's names but their stories, their joys and their sorrows. Life flowed like the river that cut through the fields, steady and familiar. And at the center of this close-knit community stood Musa, a man of wealth and influence. Musa was a merchant whose caravans stretched far beyond the borders of Akani. His goods, silks, spices, precious beads, were coveted in many lands. But his greatest treasure was not the wares he traded, it was his wife, Zola. For 15 years, their marriage had been a beacon in the village, an example of harmony and respect. Zola, with her gentle eyes and knowing smile, was loved not just by Musa but by the entire community. She was known for her wisdom, for her mastery of healing herbs that cured fevers and eased childbirth pains. People often came to her hut, seeking remedies, comfort, or simply a listening ear. Their home was a lively one. The laughter of friends, the aroma of herbs and spices, the hum of conversation, it all painted a picture of a life well lived and well loved. For many seasons, Musa and Zola moved in step with each other, two souls twined in purpose. But as the elders say, the heart is a strange drum, its rhythm can change without warning. And change it did when a young woman arrived in Akani. Her name was Amara, a beauty with skin smooth as polished ebony, eyes that sparkled with mischief, and a voice that seemed spun from silk. No one knew much about her origins. Some whispered she came from a distant village where fortunes had turned sour. Others speculated that she followed a caravan and decided to stay when she caught the eye of Musa. At first it was innocent enough. Musa, being a man of stature, welcomed newcomers. He offered her fine cloth and work in the market. But soon, villagers began noticing Musa lingering by her stall longer than necessary, laughing too loudly at her words, offering her gifts that went beyond friendly kindness. It wasn't long before tongues wagged. In the communal wells at the pounding stones, the women exchanged glances and whispers. At the evening fires, the men shook their heads. "Have you seen Musa?" they'd murmur. "He's not the man he was." Even Zola noticed the growing distance, the way Musa's eyes no longer held warmth for her, the way he came home later each night. Yet she said nothing, holding her dignity close, her heart a storm of unspoken fears. And so, beneath the calm surface of the village, a tremor had begun. The winds of change swept through Akani, and all could sense that the happy home once known was beginning to fall. The day came like any other in Akani, with the sun rising in a blaze of gold over the hills and the sounds of roosters calling the village to life. But by midday word had spread like wildfire. Musa had made an announcement. Not whispered in shadows, but proclaimed in the village square, where merchants haggled and children played. With a voice that carried over the market stalls, Musa declared, "Zola and I are no longer husband and wife. I will take Amara as my bride." There was a collective gasp, an intake of breath so sharp it seemed to still the wind. Zola stood there among them, her basket of herbs clutched tightly to her chest. She had heard the rumors, had felt the coldness in Musa's gaze, but nothing could have prepared her for the public shaming. Her face, usually serene, burned with the heat of humiliation. Women turned their eyes away, some out of sympathy, others out of fear that association with her would bring misfortune. The elders remained silent, their expressions grave. Musa, once her beloved husband, now looked at her as though she were a stranger, an obstacle cleared from his path. That evening, Zola returned to their grand home to gather her belongings. But Musa was already there, his arms crossed, his face hard. "You have no place here anymore, Zola," he said coldly. "Take what you need and leave. Amara will be here by nightfall." Tears threatened to spill, but Zola held her head high. Wordlessly, she moved through the house that had once echoed with laughter and love, gathering her things. A few garments, her baskets of herbs, a wooden comb gifted to her by her late mother. Each item seemed to weigh more heavily in her arms as she made her way to the door. As she stepped into the fading light of the evening, villagers gathered to watch. Whispers followed her like shadows. How could he do this? Poor Zola, such shame. Amara arrived soon after, adorned in rich fabrics, her steps light with triumph. With a smirk, she entered the home that had been Zola's, pausing only to glance at the woman now walking away with her life in a bundle. The next morning at the marketplace, Amara's cruelty knew no bounds. She laughed loudly, tossing coins as if to flaunt her newfound status. "A woman must keep her man entertained," she said pointedly, her eyes locking with Zola's across the stalls. But Zola, though wounded, did not respond. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and continued to sell her herbs with quiet dignity. The villagers watched, their pity deepening into respect. They whispered among themselves, "Zola walks with the strength of the ancestors." Returning to her small family hut on the edge of the village, Zola lit a single lamp. The familiar walls welcomed her, the silence soothing her frayed heart. Though alone, she was not broken. With each breath she resolved to endure. What had been taken from her was not her spirit, nor her worth. Those remained, quiet, unwavering, and waiting. In the solitude of her small hut, Zola let the tears fall freely. At night, beneath the thatched roof, her sobs echoed in the empty space that once had been warmed by love and laughter. The ache of betrayal gnawed at her heart, deeper than any wound the body could know. Her mind replayed every moment with Musa, his once gentle words, his warm embrace, and now the harsh coldness with which he had cast her aside. Alone, under the silent watch of the moon, Zola mourned not only the loss of her husband, but the crumbling of a life built on trust. But when the first light of dawn broke through the small window, something shifted within her. Wiping her tear-stained face, Zola whispered to herself, "I will not beg. I will not crawl." Her pride was battered but not shattered. Though the pain remained, her resolve had begun to harden like steel. In the mornings she returned to the forest, her hands seeking comfort in the familiar work of gathering herbs. The wild plants, the earth beneath her feet, they had always been her companions long before Musa. Among the leaves and roots she found purpose. Slowly, methodically, Zola began to craft her remedies once more. Salves for burns, teas for fever, balms to soothe aching joints. Word of her skill traveled swiftly. Mothers came for tinctures for their children, elders for relief from the stiffness of age. Coins, small but steady, began to fill her basket. Her hut, once cold and empty, now carried the scent of healing herbs, the warmth of work well done. The elders of Ukani observed this transformation with quiet admiration. Among themselves they spoke, "Zola suffers, yes, but her spirit does not bow. She carries the strength of her ancestors." In the market, when they saw her, they would nod respectfully, a silent gesture of acknowledgement. Old friends visited her hut, bringing baskets of fruit or simple meals, offering comfort in hushed tones. But some came with sharper words, urging her to take revenge. "You should curse him, Zola," they whispered. "Bring him low. Make him suffer for what he's done." Zola listened, her gaze calm and unwavering. After a long silence she would simply reply, "The earth turns. Let time speak." Her voice held no bitterness, only a deep certainty that what is sown will one day be reaped. And so, day by day, Zola rebuilt her life, not through hatred or spite, but through quiet strength. The village began to see her anew, not as the woman cast aside, but as one who endured, whose worth was not defined by any man's folly. With Zola gone, Amara wasted no time in claiming her newfound power. The grand house that once echoed with the simple harmony of Musa and Zola's life was now transformed into a place of excess. Gone were the carefully tended gardens and neat courtyards. In their place came loud music, rich perfumes, and a constant stream of guests. Amara reveled in her status. Each week she hosted lavish gatherings, inviting merchants, warriors, and travelers from nearby villages. The best musicians were hired, their drums beating long into the night. Platters of roasted meats, bowls of spiced rice, and endless pots of palm wine flowed freely. Gold and fine fabrics were displayed as though wealth itself were an endless river. She dressed in layers of silk and adorned herself with heavy beads. Her laughter rang through the halls, sometimes sharp, sometimes sweet, depending on whom it was meant to charm. To Amara, it seemed life had finally smiled upon her. And Musa, caught in the whirlwind of her beauty and her charm, allowed it all. At first, the villagers watched with curiosity. But soon their curiosity turned to unease. The simple order of life in Ikani had shifted. Children whispered stories of wild parties they heard from afar. Elders frowned as young men neglected their duties to chase the fleeting pleasures of Amara's feasts. Meanwhile, in the heart of Musa's business, cracks began to show. The caravans that once arrived full and departed richer began to falter. Crops that had always yielded well came up stunted and yellowed. Traders from distant lands began to avoid dealings with Musa, citing unfair prices or broken promises. Word traveled quickly among merchants, and soon Musa's name was no longer spoken with the respect it once commanded. With each failed deal and each withered harvest, the villagers began to murmur. In the corners of the market and beneath the shade of old trees, they whispered, "The ancestors do not smile upon this house." They spoke of the sacred vows Musa had broken, the cruelty shown to Zola, whose loyalty had been discarded like old cloth. Musa, once proud and confident, grew restless. Nights found him pacing the halls, eyes dark with worry. He snapped at servants, accused traitors of deceit, and dismissed the concerns of his remaining friends. "It is nothing," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "These are but hard seasons. Fortune will turn." But fortune did not turn. The harder Musa tried to salvage his business, the deeper he sank. Where once he had been greeted with warmth in the market, now he was met with wary glances and curt words. Even the elders who had once sought his counsel now avoided him. At home the change in Musa was clear. His face grew lined, his posture hunched with invisible weight. He began to mistrust even those closest to him. Amara, frustrated with his growing irritability, turned more of her attention to the parties, to new admirers eager for her attention. One evening, after a particularly poor harvest had been brought in, Musa stormed into the great hall where Amara entertained her guests. His voice thundered, "Enough. These foolish celebrations must end. There is no gold left to waste on such vanity." But Amara only laughed, her voice dripping with scorn. "You were not so concerned when you first laid eyes on me," she said coolly. "Perhaps the fault lies not in me but in your own weakness." Her words stung, and though Musa said nothing, the damage was done. The man who had once commanded respect now found himself a shadow in his own home, watching helplessly as his fortune crumbled, as whispers of the ancestors' displeasure grew louder with each passing day. One cool morning, as mist still clung to the tops of the trees and the village stirred to life, a stranger arrived at Zola's humble hut. He was an old traveler, his skin darkened by countless suns, his beard long and silver as moonlight. His clothes were worn, and a carved staff supported his steps, but his eyes burned with sharp intelligence, as though they had seen many worlds. He knocked softly on the wooden frame. Zola, who had risen early to sort her bundles of dried herbs, answered the door. Seeing the old man, she bowed politely. "Welcome, elder. What brings you here?" The traveler studied her for a long moment before speaking in a voice deep and weathered. "I have heard of you, Zola. A woman of great heart, wronged but unbroken." Zola inclined her head but said nothing. Her heart was cautious. Strangers were rare in these parts, and few knew of her story unless gossip had carried it. The man reached into the folds of his worn cloak and produced a small pouch made of soft animal hide. "These are for you," he said, handing it to her. "Rare herbs from the high mountains. Few know how to use them properly. For strength, use wisely." Zola accepted the gift with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "Why do you offer me this?" she asked softly. The traveler's gaze seemed to pierce through her. "Because the earth turns, and those who live with patience and honor will see their time. You will know when to use them." With those cryptic words, he turned and departed, his staff tapping rhythmically against the earth. That night, under the flickering light of her small lamp, Zola examined the herbs carefully, leaves of unusual shape, roots that shimmered faintly, powders of a deep crimson hue. Her skilled hands prepared small tinctures and infusions, her mind already considering how they might help her people. Not long after, a fever swept through the village, striking the children first. Parents, desperate and frightened, came to Zola's door. Without hesitation, she brewed the new herbs into teas, crafted salves, and applied her knowledge with great care. To everyone's astonishment, the children recovered swiftly, their strength returning faster than with any previous remedies. Word spread like wildfire. From mothers at the wells to elders at council, all spoke of Zola's healing touch. Soon, even the chiefs of neighboring villages sent for her, seeking her wisdom and skill. Nobles who once had scarcely noticed her now arrived at her hut, humbly requesting her aid. In time, her reputation soared beyond Akani. Traders spoke her name in distant markets. Chiefs and elders came bearing gifts, fine cloth, beads, goats, in exchange for her healing knowledge. The coin that had once trickled into her basket now filled it, though Zola accepted all with her usual grace, never boasting, never proud. And as her star rose, Musa's continued to fall. Where once people sought him for trade, now they sought Zola for life itself. The whispers in the marketplace grew, "Musa may have gold, but Zola brings healing. Who is truly rich?" Zola herself remained unchanged, quiet, steadfast, and kind. Her heart held no bitterness, only the quiet satisfaction of purpose fulfilled. The old traveler's words echoed in her mind, "The earth turns." Musa's household, once the grandest in Akani, grew colder by the day. The echoes of laughter and music from the wild parties were long gone. In their place came harsh arguments that spilled from the grand hall into the streets for all to hear. The The villagers whispered, "The union is cursed." It began with small quarrels, over coins, over missing jewelry, over words carelessly spoken. But soon the fights between Musa and Amara became fierce and frequent. Musa, once enchanted by her beauty and charm, now found fault in her every action. "You spend too much. You waste what little remains," he shouted. Amara, once quick with a playful smile, now snapped with venom. "And who brought us to this ruin? You with your foolish pride and empty deals." As weeks passed, Amara's once striking beauty began to fade. Her hair, thick and dark as the raven's wing, began to thin and fall in clumps. Her skin, once smooth and glowing, grew sallow and lined. She lost weight, her fine clothes hanging loosely from her frame. The transformation frightened her. No charm or powder could mask the sickness that seemed to drain her life. "It is her," she hissed to Musa one night. "That witch Zola. She has cursed me." Musa too was plagued with misfortune. His business dealings, already faltering, collapsed one after another. Traders avoided him. Old debts came due and no gold remained to settle them. Desperation crept into Musa's heart, twisting his once proud spirit. At night, he lay awake beside the frail, coughing Amara, his mind racing. "It must be Zola," he muttered. "She has poisoned the winds against me." The idea took hold of him, growing stronger with each failure, each loss. Finally, in his bitterness, Musa stormed into the council of elders, his face drawn and angry. "Zola has cursed my house," he declared. "She must answer for it." The elders, wise and calm, listened without interruption. When Musa finished his accusations, the eldest among them, a man named Jali, rose slowly and spoke. "We have watched, Musa. We have seen Zola's path, one of patience, of service, of healing. She has done no wrong. It is not her hand that brings your misfortune." Another elder added, "You broke the sacred bond. You cast away a loyal heart. The earth remembers and the ancestors see. What comes now is of your own making." Musa, stunned and silenced, could find no reply. He left the council, the whispers of their judgment echoing in his mind. In the days that followed, the villagers continued to murmur among themselves, "It is the bond he broke, the vow he betrayed." The ancestors turned their faces from him. And so, the cursed union of Musa and Amara withered further, a living reminder that the earth turns and that betrayal, once sown, bears bitter fruit. As the moons passed, the kingdom of Akani prepared for its grandest event of the year, the Festival of Masks. It was a time when the king opened his court to nobles, merchants, and common folk alike. All would come dressed in fine garments and wear masks of every shape and color. Behind the masks, titles and grievances were hidden. For one night, all were equal, free to dance, to speak, to celebrate. This year's festival carried special significance. The king himself had decreed that after a season of hardship, failed crops, sickness, and unrest, the people needed joy, a night to renew their spirits. The invitation was sent far and wide, from the highest chief to the humblest healer. Zola received her invitation with quiet surprise. The royal messenger had come to her humble hut and bowed low as he handed her the scroll. Though she lived simply, her growing fame as a healer had reached the ears of the king. It was said that even members of the royal family had been restored by her remedies. At first, Zola thought to decline. Her days were full with tending to the sick, her life far from the glitter of royal courts. But her old friends and the village elders urged her gently, "You have earned this place, Zola. Go. Walk among them with your head high." And so, when the night of the festival arrived, Zola dressed simply, in a flowing robe of soft white, her only ornament a white mask, plain and unadorned. It covered her face, but her calm dignity shone through. Across the village, Musa had fallen into ruin. His once grand home was crumbling, debts weighed heavily on him. Amara, pale and sickly, rarely left her bed. Many of Musa's old friends had turned away, unwilling to associate with a man so clearly marked by misfortune. Desperation gnawed at Musa. The whispers of the council, the judgment of the villagers haunted him. More than anything, he yearned for forgiveness, a way to lift the shadow that hung over his life. And in this dark state he heard of the festival. Perhaps, he thought, if I can speak with Zola, if I can beg her forgiveness before the court, the curse may lift. With borrowed garments and a hastily made mask of dull gold, Musa made his way to the palace. The grandeur of the place, once so familiar, now felt foreign and cold. The palace courtyard was ablaze with lanterns. Musicians played drums and flutes. Dancers spun in colorful robes. Men and women in intricate masks moved about, laughing, conversing, sipping sweet wines. Behind their masks, no one knew another's station, Prince or pauper, healer or merchant, all mingled freely. Musa searched the crowd, heart pounding. He looked for the woman he had once cast aside, imagining how she might appear. But among the masks he saw no sign of her. And Zola was there, moving gracefully among the guests. Her simple white mask set her apart from the gaudy displays around her. Nobles and elders greeted her with respect, though many did not know her true face. She observed Musa from a distance, his hunched shoulders, his restless gaze. She sensed his desperation but remained unseen, letting the night unfold. Musa, now frantic, approached guest after guest, each time peering beneath their masks, only to find strangers or unfriendly eyes. He cursed himself silently, I cannot even recognize her. Fool that I am. The night wore on. Music rose and fell, dancers twirled, the air thick with the scent of flowers and spice. Yet Musa found no peace, only a deepening sense of shame and regret. And Zola, behind her simple mask, watched quietly, her heart steady. The earth had turned. The night belonged to her. As the night deepened, the festival reached its heart. The great drums of Akani thundered in the palace courtyard, calling all guests to the central floor for the dance of the masks, a tradition where partners were chosen at random, where faces were hidden and words flowed more freely than in the light of day. Masked figures glided into the circle, silks and beads shimmering in the lantern light. Laughter echoed. No titles, no grudges, no past, only music and movement. Zola, in her flowing white robe and simple mask, stood quietly at the edge watching the dancers swirl. Though many eyes followed her with curiosity, none recognized the healer who had once been the scorned wife. Among nobles and commoners alike, her fame had grown, but her true face remained unseen that night. Across the courtyard, Musa lingered in the shadows. His heart weighed heavy and his pride hung in tatters. The gold mask he wore could not hide his hollow eyes. He had failed to find Zola. His debts loomed larger with each passing day. Amara, now frail and cold, no longer offered comfort. He was alone, desperate, a man who had squandered everything. The king's herald called for the guests to choose partners. The crowd surged forward in a graceful tide, bodies and masks mingling. Musa, caught in the movement, stumbled into the throng. He reached out and his hand met that of a woman in white. It was Zola. Neither spoke at first. The music swelled and by the old customs they joined the dance. In that sacred moment, it was forbidden to refuse a partner. And so Musa, unaware of the woman's identity, found himself moving in rhythm with her. For a while he said nothing, lost in the flow of the dance. But as they turned and spun beneath the lanterns, the mask seemed to loosen his tongue. The bitterness, the regret, it spilled forth. He sighed heavily. I was a fool, he began, voice low. I had a good life, a good woman. But I cast it all aside for vanity, for pride. Zola's gaze, steady behind her mask, did not waver. She let him speak. My home is a ruin, Musa continued, voice cracking. My wealth gone, my name shamed. The woman I chose, she lies sick and cold. The villagers shun me. I cannot escape the weight of it. It is as if some curse binds me. He paused, breath shallow. The dance slowed, partners drawing closer. Musa's mask gleamed dully in the soft light. The woman in white remained silent. He felt compelled to go on. I sought forgiveness, but she is beyond my reach. I have searched this night, but cannot find her. And then for the first time Zola spoke, her voice calm, even resonant with quiet power. The earth remembers, she said softly. The heart remembers. You reap as you sow. The word struck Musa like a blow. He froze mid-step, the blood draining from his face. His partner's voice, though masked, it was familiar, unforgettable. Zola? He whispered, dread rising in him. But before he could ask further, the music ended. The dancers separated in a graceful parting. Zola turned and melted into the crowd with quiet dignity, her white mask shining faintly beneath the lanterns. Musa stood alone in the middle of the floor, trembling. The eyes of the guests, though masked, seemed to weigh upon him. The shame, the regret, it became too great to bear. Unable to remain, Musa fled the palace, slipping into the dark streets of Ukani. The music and laughter of the festival echoed behind him, each note a cruel reminder of all he had lost. Thus, on that night, among the masked revelers, cold revenge had been served, not with anger, not with curses, but with calm truth and unshakable dignity. The earth had turned. The wheel of karma had spoken. And Musa left the festival in disgrace, his heart heavy with the burden of his own deeds. The morning after the festival, the story of the masked dance spread quickly through Ukani. Though none could say for certain, the whispers grew. Musa had danced with Zola, and her words had cut deeper than any blade. In the weeks that followed, Musa's life unraveled completely. His remaining business ventures collapsed. Creditors, emboldened by his fall from grace, came to collect what was owed. One by one his possessions were seized: wagons, fine robes, livestock. The grand estate, once the symbol of his pride, could no longer be maintained. Its walls cracked, its gardens withered. Reluctantly, under the weight of growing debt, Musa was forced to sell the estate for a pittance. The home that had once hosted grand feasts and glittering guests was purchased by a distant merchant who cared nothing for Musa's former status. With the estate gone, Musa moved into a small, crumbling dwelling at the edge of the village. The gold mask from the festival lay forgotten in a dusty corner, a symbol of all he had lost. Amara too had grown bitter. Her beauty, once her power, had faded. Her sickness lingered, and her love for Musa had long since turned to contempt. One day, without warning, she left him for another man, a trader from a distant province who still had coin and youth. Alone, penniless and shunned by many, Musa became a shadow of the man he once was. The village children pointed and whispered. The market women shook their heads when he passed. The elders offered no pity. Meanwhile, Zola's path rose with quiet strength. The tale of her healing and wisdom spread beyond Akani. Chiefs from neighboring villages sent envoys to seek her remedies. Her small hut could no longer hold the gifts and visitors who came daily. The village council, seeing her goodness, her service, and her grace, called a special gathering beneath the sacred baobab tree. Before the people of Akani, the eldest counselor stood and proclaimed, "Zola, healer of hearts, restorer of life, you have brought honor to our village. You have shown dignity in the face of betrayal and kindness in the face of cruelty. From this day, you shall be known as Mother of the Village." The crowd cheered, voices rising in joy. Zola, humble as ever, bowed her head, her heart full but her words few. With the title came new responsibility. The council provided land near the village center, where a great healing house was built, a place of peace, open to all. There, beneath carved wooden beams and soft cloth banners, Zola welcomed everyone, rich and poor, noble and common. Her remedies cured fevers, eased births, and mended old wounds. Her words soothed troubled spirits. And though many came seeking her wisdom, she remained unchanged, the same woman who had once returned to her small hut with only dignity as her shield. Her fame grew, but her heart remained steady. For she knew, the earth remembers, the heart remembers, and those who walk in truth need no vengeance. Life will bring its own justice. Years passed, and with them the faces of Akani changed. New children were born, the old ones grew tall and strong. The once crumbling edges of the village flourished again, for the seasons of hardship had given way to a time of learning and wisdom. Yet the story of Zola and Musa remained, a lesson told again and again beneath the stars. On many an evening, as the fires crackled and the night air cooled, the children of Akani gathered around their elders. With wide eyes and eager ears, they would listen as the old voices wove tales of the past, and none were told more often than the story of Zola. Never scorn the loyal heart, the elders would begin, their voices deep with meaning. Never betray a vow, for the earth turns slowly, but turn it will. And so the children heard of how Musa, once the proudest man in the village, had cast aside a faithful wife for vanity and fleeting beauty. They learned how Zola, though wounded by betrayal, had stood tall, refusing to be broken. They heard of her rise, how her hands had healed the sick, how her wisdom had calmed troubled spirits, how the king himself had honored her. And they listened, wide-eyed, to the tale of the masked festival, when justice was served not with anger, but with calm words that echoed through a guilty heart. And they always asked, what became of Musa? The elders would nod toward the far edge of the village, where rocky hills met the dry grasslands. There, they would say, he tends goats, a poor man with worn hands. His riches are gone, his name faded. He walks alone with the weight of his deeds upon his shoulders. Indeed it was so. Each dawn, Musa would lead a small herd of goats into the hills, his steps slow, his back bent. No servants followed him now. His fine robes had long since been traded for coarse cloth. The villagers spared him no cruelty, but neither did they offer warm company. For they remembered, and so did he. And Zola? She remained the heart of Akani. In her healing house, now tended by young apprentices, her voice guided all, chiefs and farmers alike. Her wisdom shaped the next generation. The title of Mother of the Village was hers still, but to the people she had become more, a living legend, an example of strength, grace, and patience. It was said that when the winds blew through the baobab trees at night, they carried her lesson with them. Karma walks slow, but her steps are sure. And so, as each new child grew and heard the story, they carried its truth in their hearts. That vows are sacred, that kindness holds power, and that betrayal, though swift, brings a price. Thus the tale of Zola and Musa lived on, a quiet fire that burned through the years, steady, warm, and eternal.